Thanks so much for joining me for another night, our second installment in this series, looking at the daily Middot, Middot HaYom during the Sefira together. And I just want to say, first of all, that it's really very special to be able to share this time with all of you, and I appreciate everyone taking the time to share and to think about some ideas together. Also, I just want to point out that, of course, this is what we're dealing with is an incredibly complex, profound system that has really been studied for centuries, if not millennia, and I don't mean to oversimplify. Our mission over here, is for the few minutes that we share together, is to look at the system of the Sefirot, this series of concepts and interrelationships that, as the Ramchal talks about extensively, is essentially, if we could boil it down, is the way that Hashem is manifest in our world. It's the way that the Ein Sof, the limitless, pure existence of God Himself, is manifest in our world, the way that we can perceive Him and relate to Him as some sort of entity. By necessity, because we live in a finite universe, the way that Hashem comes across is finite, right? Not in essence, but in behavior, in attribute, in manifestation. But what we're looking at is there are so many different ways to study this subject. The way that we wanted to look at it was to take it very grassroots, to look at how it is that the way Hashem is manifest, as we saw the mitzvah of V'halachta b'drachav, calls upon a person to begin to emulate Hashem in our own lives, to look to God's attributes and mirror those qualities in our own behavior, in our own experience and achievements. Our idea was to look to the Torah to see how the Torah is an instructions towards that greatest achievement, that greatest pleasure, the purpose of creation, the way the Ramchal talks about, that the Chok HaTov Lehitiv, that God's, in being a perfect, unimaginable, limitless entity, part of the nature of that is to bestow good. We wanted to embark upon that mission and find the good within our own lives. And in doing that, we look to the Torah as a guide towards that ultimate freedom, as a guide towards life itself. We saw in Lecha ben Chorin Elamisha Osek B'Torah, and so traditionally, as we make our way along the steps of the path of freedom, from the beginnings of Pesach to our ultimate achievement on Shavuot, we go through this system of the Middot of each day. Literally, a Midah, as the Ramchal also explains, is a measuring, the way that God meets Himself out, the way that we can measure and assess God's presence in the world. And what we want to do is look at that from the standpoint of, what does that mean for me? How do I inculcate those attributes in my own life? How do I see the Torah as a guide towards living my life in emulation of God? So today, we experience the midah of Tiferet ShebeGevura, literally meaning beauty within judgment, or beauty within strength. And I wanted to kind of look at, with you guys, two different aspects of what it means to have beauty within strength. Right? What exactly does that mean? We started on Friday looking at the first two Middot of Gevura. Chesed ShebeGevura was, if we could say it in a nutshell, was Gevura requires the ability to cradle life, to support life. We talked about smolo tachat l'roshi, that the smol, the midat hadin, has to be embracing of life and supporting it, not crushing it. And we saw that Gevura ShebeGevura required a level of restraint, of holding back. That sometimes, like the Mishnah says, Ezehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro, sometimes there's a requirement to utilize resistance, and that is the greatest expression of our strength. Today, what I want to look at with you is this concept of beauty within resistance, beauty within strength. So the place for me to start with this is the Mishnah, the beginning of the second chapter in Pirkei Avos, which amazingly, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the great author of the Mishnah, the compiler of the Torah Shebaal Peh for the first time, tells us an astounding statement. He says, Rabbi Omer, Ezoi derech yeshara sheyavor lo ha'adam. So he's talking about choice, he's talking about definition, and he says, how does a person choose the right path, right? What is the right path that a person should choose, should be yivror for himself, brera, to clarify, to define for themselves? How does a person go about deciding what path they should embark upon? Very mat'im for the whole process of going through the Sefirat HaOmer. And Rebbe's answer is astounding. He says, Kol shehi tiferet leoseha v'tiferet lo min ha'adam. So the way you execute this judgment, this essential judgment of one's life, is you base it on beauty, on tiferet. And he says that it pivots on 2 points. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi tells us, how does a person decide what path they take? Kol shehi tiferet leoseha, anything which is beautiful to the one who is doing it, to her performer, v'tiferet lo min ha'adam, and beautiful or splendorous, harmonious amongst mankind as a whole. So there are a variety of different explanations about how to describe what this Mishnah is talking about. What are these 2 different facets of beauty? What does it mean to have beauty for the doer and beauty amongst mankind? The simple interpretation is that things need to be, when you're making a choice or you're embarking on a particular way of life, the choices need to be harmonious, integrous within your own life, and provide the ability to be integrated within society. So it needs to be something which is not a contradiction to your own personal life, and is also something which allows you to streamline seamlessly into the greater picture. That it's not only not a clash within your personal life, but it's also integrative on a klal level, on a collective level. So as Rashi explains Gemara in the Nedarim, Rashi says that's basically what this Mishnah means. Rambam explains this as well, all along the same lines. Probably the most beautiful language in articulating this is the Ramchal, or Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the great Kabbalist and Jewish philosopher, in the Hakdama to the Mesilas Yesharim, where he's talking about this idea of the Halachta Bidrachav, which we've been talking about, walking in God's ways, emulating God's characteristics as manifest in the world within our own behavior. And the Ramchal says, what does this Mishnah mean? He says, Kol shi tiferet lo oseh v'tiferet lo min ha'adam, dahainu kol ha'olech el tachlit ha'atava amitit. Anything which takes a person forward along the path to the ultimate perfection, the ultimate good, which is the intended result of creation. And the way he describes then these 2 types of beauty are, dahainu shetoladeta chizuk haTorah v'tikun achvas hamedinos. So he says, what does this mean? Strengthening of Torah. That's the Tiferet le'oseha, is that it strengthens the instructions for living within one's own life. And what that means is that when a person is setting off to embark in those type of choices, it has to be something that accentuates life with a capital L within your process of living. In other words, it has to be something that isn't diminishing your own selfhood, isn't squishing you into a smaller and more narrow description of self. And also, says the Ramchal, as far as the other aspect of Tiferet lo min ha'adam, beautiful amidst humanity, he says, v'tikun achvat hamedinot, a rectifying of national brotherhood. So the Ramchal takes us to an entirely different level. In other words, according to the Ramchal, you can't suffice with how you fit within your little social circle. What Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was describing was not making sure that there's a barber in town. So if you like cutting hair, you'll be the local barber. The Ramchal says you've got to think big. When you're thinking about life choices, you need to think about how you can impact the world, how your choice is going to manifest on a global level. Does this choice bring the world closer to international unity? As we say at the end of every single tefillah, l'sakin olam b'malchus shakai, to rectify the entire world under God's sovereignty, is your choice bringing your life and the world closer to that level of harmony? If it's not necessarily the right choice. Now a person needs to feel this out and figure out exactly how that works. But Rav Kook has a really beautiful, I just want to quickly read to you. The Rav Kook writes, I quoted you guys the other day, it's this incredible sefer that they put out called Yesh Lecha Kanfei Ruach, which is a collection of many, many astounding statements from all of Rav Kook's diaries and journals and all of his limitless books that he put out in his lifetime. There's 2 statements that are brought down in here. One of them is from one of his notebooks, personal diaries that he kept. And he says the following words. He says, Kol Adam yesh lo hamaslul shelo. Every person has their own path, their own journey. Sha'al yado hu bala ashro. That only along that path do they arrive at their own riches, at the wealth of their own life. L'tachlit havayato, to the purpose of their own existence. Shebohu mitdabek leotzro, and it's only by means of traversing that path that they arrive at a relationship with their Creator. Velo yuchal lavo lemaganmat chavtzo b'maslul acher. He is unable to arrive at the fulfillment of his own desires by means of any other path. Afal pishu maslul yashar ba'ad acherim. Even if it's a beautiful path for other people, if it's not a beautiful path for you, it's not going to bring you to your ultimate fulfillment of your own potential. And so he says that everybody needs to know that they're called upon. Shekarui lo la'avod al pi ofen ha'hakara v'argasha miuchad shelo. Every person is called upon by a divine decree to follow their own unique abilities and their own capacity for connection with God. Al pi shorish nishmato, which is based on the root of their own soul and the way that their soul is found in the collective of Knesset Yisrael. And even if that doesn't appear to be the same or to be standardized in the way that other people are living their lives. And so Rav Kook takes this very seriously. In many of his writings, he talks about how if a person finds within himself latent artistic talents, they need to find expression within their life for those abilities. If they have an unquenchable desire to write, to compose, as he identifies within himself, Rav Kook, a person needs to find outlet for that. And he says that much of the negativity and the depression that a person finds in their life and is encountered by is a result of not giving your soul sufficient outlet for its own innate abilities. Because that's what the Mishnah is talking about over here. What is the path that a person needs to choose? What is the manifestation of gevurot that a person needs to have in their life? It's that it has to be tiferet lo lehoseha. It needs to be beautiful. It needs to be harmonious within one's own life. It needs to speak to the qualities which are latent within the individual as they are in the world. I just wanted to point out, as a result of that, taking the big picture into consideration, that it's not just about what's beautiful for you, but what's beautiful for the world, right? Tiferet lo min ha'adam. We have an astounding halacha. This is halacha l'maisa, brought down in practical law. The Rambam paskins this in Hilchot Sanhedrin, in the 2nd chapter. An amazing thing. He says that part of the laws of creating a court system, the Supreme Court of Israel, Bimhera B'Yameinu, we'll have that reestablished in our days. We're truly on life support without this. Is that part of one of the essential qualities of having a Sanhedrin is that each of the judges that is appointed to be part of the Sanhedrin has to have certain qualities in their character. And the way that we kind of screen for this is the Rambam says as follows. He says, we don't appoint to the Sanhedrin lo zaken muflag, not somebody who's exceedingly old, velo saris, nor somebody who's unable to have children, mipnei sheyesh behen achzariyut, because they have too much cruelty. They don't have the same capacity to connect with the people, right? They're beyond the stage where they can identify with the Hamon Am, with the general population, what it's like to be a person in this world under regular conditions. Velo mi she'en lo banim, also somebody who doesn't have children, amazingly enough. He could be the Gadol Hador, incredible Talmid Chacham, but if he doesn't have children, he's disqualified for the Supreme Court. Why is that? Says the Rambam, Kedei she'yehei rachaman, in order that they be merciful. Merciful? I thought we're talking about objective law over here. I mean, I don't get it. The guy's a brilliant guy. He's a genius beyond, comparison. He knows every single law in the Shulchan Aruch. He can't assess the court case in front of him and give an objective feedback, provide, a clear-cut halachic ruling. So we have a major misconception over here. And that is that we think that sensitivity is not part of objectivity. We think that if a person has empathy, and if a person can identify on a human level, they're missing a quality of objectivity. That to be fully objective would mean to view everybody in the scenario as if they were numbers, right? Without any individuality, without any heart, without any soul. And what the halacha mandates is that sensitivity is part of objectivity. A sense of the harmonious nature of life, of what it means to be a person, that these people aren't numbers showing up in your court case. These are human beings with feelings, with realities to themselves, with personalities, with complexity. And for a person not to know what that's like makes them incapable of providing true mishpat, which again, mishpat always has the connotation of sensibility, that it's connected. Like when Avraham Avinu complains to Hashem, "Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat." I don't understand. Of course, you can do din, that's fantastic. But if it's not going to be mishpat, it's not expressive of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem acknowledges that, he concedes. That part of the way that Hashem manifests his din in the world is through Tiferet, through harmony, through recognizing that there's a sensitive and indeed subjective aspect to din. And that only by taking that into consideration does a person really come to their fullest recognition of what din means. And so I'll close with just a beautiful medrash that brings this to light. I love this story. So it's brought down in the Yalkut Shimoni, an incredible story that it says that Rabbi Avohu and Rish Lakish were walking on the road to Caesarea. And Rabbi Avohu turned to Rish Lakish and he said to him, I don't understand, Caesarea is like this disgusting city. It's full of lowlives and, people are just full of garbage. Like, why are we walking into this city? What gives us the right to enter? Shachein Tov, you're supposed to, be surrounded by good people. The Rambam says if there's nobody positive, you should go out into the deserts. What are we doing walking into Caesarea? The Medrash says an astounding thing. It says that Reb Shimon got off his donkey, picked up a handful of dirt, and shoved it into the mouth of Rabbi Avoh. Rabbi Avoh, these are talking about major leaders of the Jewish people, takes his fistful of dirt and shoves it in the face of Rabbi Avoh. So Rabbi Avoh is like gasping for breath, and he turns to me and he says, "What is this? What did I do? Like, what's the problem?" And Rabbi Shimon Rish Lakish says to him such an important thing. He says to him, "Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu rotze b'mishu omer diltoria al kol Yisrael." The Holy One, blessed be He, has no interest in someone who speaks blasphemy about any member of Israel. God has no interest in some. Of course, Caesarea is a horrible city, but how dare you talk about the most beautiful people of Israel using such harsh and crass terms? You think, well, I'm being objective. Aren't they all Rishayim? Aren't they all terrible people? Who knows what they're doing in Caesarea? We shouldn't be there. Granted, we could talk about whether it's appropriate for us to be there in the city or not. But how dare you put down the people of Israel and speak about them in such harsh terms? Dirt into the mouth of somebody, right? And this is it's meant to be reflective of the Nachash, right? The Nafash Afar Lachmo. The Nachash, who's the symbol of Lashon Hara, of the whole approach to life, which identifies life as evil, which can write off reality as being negative and full of cynicism. And it's an astounding type of medrash. And I just want to leave with that question for us, which is that when we're executing judgment in our lives and we're living with this life of this Midah of Gevura, is our judgment creating harmony or division? In other words, when we make judgment calls, when we're executing judgment with ourselves or with others, and again, judgment as far as restraint goes, as far as holding back, or as far as resilience, as pushing forward, like the Gibor, are we executing judgment in a way which is bringing harmony, Tiferet, and Yichud to the entire people of Israel, connecting them with God, or are we breaking down boundaries? Are we allowing the people to disintegrate? And what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is telling us is that when a person is choosing life paths for themselves, it's essential to take Tiferet, harmony and beauty, as the utmost consideration. Not only is it one of the most important considerations, it's the only two factors that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi deems relevant for a person making that type of decision. Tiferet le'oseha, v'tiferet lo min ha'adam. So those are some thoughts as we come to a close on Tiferet ShebeGevura. Thanks so much again for joining. I really appreciate the time that everyone shares, and it definitely means a lot to me. So thanks so much for joining. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around. Otherwise, have a great night, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Baruch Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Chaim, firstly, gesund stuff.
Appreciate
it.
Thanks.
In terms of, I guess, the Rambam Sanhedrin about being a Rahman,
Mm-hmm.
so I think what you're saying in general is that what drives a person then has to be the ability to be driving towards connectivity as opposed to disintegration. Is that what you're saying in terms of why it's an essential quality?
Yeah, essentially.
So, I guess maybe that is my answer. but just trying to understand why it still is required, meaning the din would be the same. You're saying just it paints the context to it?
It's not, it wouldn't be the same, right? That's what I'm saying. Objectivity includes sensitivity. I mean, you can't be fully objective about the nature of the case if you don't know what it means to be a mother, a father, to have children, to know what patience means, to know what compassion means, to be able to look at things from a variety of vantage points. You simply lack that ability. And again, someone could be a genius and they could have read every child-raising book on the planet. It's not about the data in that case, right? It's much more as far as how the experience is going to influence their perspective on the circumstance. Again, I've never sat on a Sanhedrin, so I can't think of all the permutations of how this would take. But I think that what we're seeing coming across is that on either side, if a person is either too removed in one direction or the other, right, they're not on the derech hayashar. They're either too merciless because they've disconnected from reality. They've gone beyond the stage of being a parent, or they're not there yet. Both of those are disqualifiers. Because in both situations, you lack the presence, the awareness of how your life informs your objectivity, and therefore you're disqualified from the Sanhedrin. Remember, it's always ein l'dayan ela ma she'einav ro'ot, right? It's always based on what the Sanhedrin's perspective is, right? We say emet me'aretz titzmach. It's the Sanhedrin's ability to adjudicate law is the definition of truth, right? It's not like there's a truth that they might be missing if they paskin wrong. But in order for us to create the aspect of truth that the Sanhedrin is supposed to embody in this world, it not only needs to be integrative as far as shivim lashon, as far as understanding, having full mastery of every single field of life, it also has to include mastery of the human experience. And part of that human experience is being a rachaman, being a parent, being involved in the nature of life in a regular bracket of age and experience that the people are going to be involved in. If that helps a little bit. Yeah. All right, very good.
So, Chaim.
Yeah.
Quick question. What exactly then would be kind of the cutoff point, essentially, to not allow for the destruction of, din and with, subjectivity and that all being objective? Because after you're being a Rahman so many times, there's only so many times that din can't be taken advantage of.
So you're saying that din is like you're saying that inevitably din is going to be run over by rachamim? Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe I'm not fully understanding your point.
But basically, in the case of the Gemara, I guess in Makot, basically kind of describes that essentially if you're matur, you never killed anybody for 70 years, then we just allowed a lot of people to get away with murder.
Yeah. I mean, and that's actually seen as a virtuous thing, right? The Gemara doesn't say that Rabbi Akiva is at fault for that. That's actually considered to be a virtuous thing, right? In other words, that level of sensitivity of Rahmanut, of being able to analyze things from other perspectives, is precisely the type of din that's seen as being most virtuous. I mean, that's a raya to what we're saying. But ultimately, din wins out. Like the Ramchal talks about it. It's worth reading through. The Ramchal talks about that ultimately, Rahmanus and Tiferet is the way that din is properly manifest in the world. I think it's without that level of mercy, compassion, sensitivity, you don't actually have real din, right? Real, meaning we're talking about real din. Din includes Rahmanut. When God creates the way that He manifests in the physical world, it includes the Middot of Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. There's no manifestation of God's din without having all those three factors as a part of it. To have pure din would be a lacking in the way that we see the ultimate good manifesting in the world, the way that we identify Hashem as being the din, as being the dayan. So we talk about Hashem as being Melech Ohev Tzedakah U'Mishpat. It's righteousness in justice, right? It's not that we say, wow, Hashem is this unimaginable din that nobody could possibly understand how He could be so cruel and hardship. Whether we can see it in our own lives or not, we understand that in the ultimate picture, there is full accountability, and everything that happens in this world, right? We ultimately say that there's mishpat to it. We don't say less din less dayan. We say that there's actual full accountability and everything finds its place, and ultimately the entire universe reaches a shleimus that we couldn't have reached without the process. But it doesn't mean that it's pure din. I mean, din in order for the world, Chazal say this right at the beginning of the Torah. Bereshis bara Elokim, right? B'tchila alam machshavto livro ha'olam b'midas hadin. That Hashem wanted to make the whole world founded on pure justice. Ra she'eino yachol liskayim. He saw that it was unable to support a world like that. You can't actually have a world in which humanity goes through a process of tikkun and of getting rid of ra and approaching towards pure tov and acquiring their own existence without that level of wiggle room in order to allow people to make those achievements. So yes, din always finds its place, but it's finding its place appropriately when balanced back against chesed and tiferet. And that's really the whole merkava. As we'll start looking at tomorrow, all of the further midos beyond chesed, gvura, tiferes are beyond even the basic merkava, right? The Ramchal says that the entire hanhagas habriya is all chesed, gvura, tiferes, and the various manifestations of those three and how they're all interrelated and balance off of each other. The other midos are manifestations of those, or experiences that you can have, or extensions of those, but the essential qualities are all found in these three. So the balancing out between chesed, gevura, and tiferet is essential. None of them on its own creates a sustainable world. So anyway, something to think about. All right, shkoyach chevra. I don't want to keep everybody for too long, but we'll wrap it up. But feel free to message me if you have any questions. But yesher koach, this is good stuff. All right, take care, everyone. Laila tov.